Let me guess, you come to work on Monday morning, you fire up GitHub Actions or Jenkins, and you see it. You see it in all its glory. The Christmas tree of your tests. Red, green, red, and green. So you rerun them, or you rerun the failed ones, and you tell your boss or your PO or whoever that, yeah, don't worry, these are just unstable sometimes. It's just Selenium acting up, it's the environment, it's the network lag, it's everything. It's the Pope or the Queen of Scotland, whatever. But, it just sometimes happens that these tests do tend to act up. So I have heard this excuse 1,000 times. We all have, so let's not pretend to be saints here. But today we need to have a serious talk. Because deep down, it's not the environment, it's not the network, and it's certainly not the Selenium or Playwright as a whole. It's you. The problem is in you. And to be even more precise, it's your code. And so today we are going to talk about the 3 deadly sins that cause your code to be this deadly mess. So let's try and figure this out together in order to have this bowl of spaghetti neatly organized. I'm Casper, welcome to Testeroni, where I help QA engineers become test automation engineers one slice at a time. And today, let's dive right into the topic of the deadly sins of flaky and untrustworthy tests. So, sin number 1, ignoring race conditions. This, I would say, is the most popular problem that the beginners tend to face when they are starting out in automation. You may create a test that just says, click button and check text, and it seems fine and dandy until you actually do that without waiting for anything in between. Because what tends to happen in this scenario is that the application may sometimes be slower than your script. It may take 500 milliseconds for the app to actually load after you click the button. And so even though it looks instantaneous to you, it's not instantaneous to your framework. And so after it tries to actually check the text, it can't find anything, and so it just produces a fail state. But another time you rerun the test and magically it works because there was no network lag, or it took 100 milliseconds instead of 500 milliseconds, and then it magically works out of the box. So this is the recipe for creating flaky tests. And so what do most beginners do? They tend to add a Thread.sleep or any other means of pausing the framework to actually wait for a set duration until the web application is loaded. And don't do that. Don't do that, because Thread.sleeps do have their place in automation, but they should be used as a last resort or in things which you cannot directly influence. In this scenario, it's actually introducing poison to your code. They make your suit slow, needlessly slow, and they don't fix the problem. They just hide it under a set duration. So the solution is to use smart waits, or to use assertions that retry, or to use things that are built into your framework. For example, Playwright is pretty good at not having to think about all those waits manually. So just never assume that the UI is ready. Wait for the state and not for the duration. So you can accomplish this using WebDriver wait in Selenium, or expect locator to be visible in Playwright. But either way, you should wait for the state. Sin number 2 is testing on dirty data. So basically not thinking about the independence of your tests. Let's say you have test A, which tries to create a username John, and test B that also tries to create a username John. And so the problem is, if test A runs first, test B may fail because that user is already present within the database. And if B runs in isolation, then magically it starts working. And this is because you have not thought through the independence of those tests. They cannot run in parallel now. And now they are also racing for the same asset. They are fighting over the same data. And the solution to this is to think about isolation. Your tests should be hermetic. They should be able to run irregardless of one another. Only then is your framework actually modular enough to be kind of trusted, regardless of how many of the tests and in which order you decide to run on a given day. Every test should create its own fresh data and clean it up afterwards. Or you can take care of that within the whole suite. For example, when you have a whole suite setup and suite teardown so that it is taken care of regardless of how many tests you run inside that. But still, this isolation should be taken into account. Alternatively, if you cannot do that, you can also use some kind of unique ID. So the username that the tests are creating, if each of them needs to create the user, can be, instead of simply John, it can be John underscore a timestamp, for example. And so those tests will create different users. But either way, you should keep in mind that if your tests cannot run independently of the previous test succeeding or failing, then you are not building a framework. You are basically building a house of cards or a line of dominoes. If one falls over, everything is just a huge mess. Sin number 3 is doing everything, and I mean everything, through the UI. So if you need to prepare a product for the shop, so let's say you need to add it to the inventory of your shop, do you actually need to log in and go to the dashboard and create a product there and fill out the form and click save and refresh and so on and so on? Do you really need to do all of that through the UI? Because let me tell you, UI is almost always the most unstable part of the application. And if you're doing what we have just discussed, you are basically introducing 50 places for the test to actually flake out before it can actually do its job. And of course, sometimes you may need, or you may have a reason to do the whole end-to-end flow, including all these preparations and stuff. But more often than not, you are just doing it out of laziness or habit, because if everything is done through the front end, let's do this through the front end too. And the solution is to use the API to set up the state. If the goal of a given test is to check whether the checkout works as it should, do you really need to go through the whole end-to-end flow for it to check it? Maybe you can use an API call to instantaneously add a product to your cart and only open the browser for the actual testing part, so actually navigating to your cart and trying to check out. Maybe you can just kind of bypass some of the elements which can also introduce flakiness, because each of these steps is a possible place where flakiness can be introduced. Maybe you can bypass all of that by using simple API calls. This is called the hybrid approach, and it makes your tests 10 times faster and 10 times more stable. So if you don't have to, then stop clicking so much and start actually automating using the best tool for the job. So listen, like between you and me, if you need to rerun a test 3 times just to get a green light, then you are not actually testing anything. If you go down this path, the developers will stop trusting your test results. The team will start second-guessing your reports. And hell, even you will start second-guessing your own reports, because nothing will be stable anymore. And undermining the stability of your automation suite, undermining the credibility of its results, it's actually the death of your framework, because there is no more cardinal sin in the universe than your automation suite not being actually reputable, respectable, and reflecting the reality of the application that is under test. So stop blaming the ghosts in the machine, or the magical network lags, or the flakiness that is definitely not your problem. Stop blaming all of it. Start looking at whether you are actually isolating the tests properly, whether you are not introducing flakiness with your wait strategy, and whether you are actually taking advantage of the possible API requests rather than clicking around. If you fix the code, the problems will fix themselves. And if you want to learn how to write robust, stable code from day one, and to understand even more about flakiness, where it comes from, and how to combat this, I hardly invite you to the Fundamentals playlist that is available on the channel. It's also linked down below. So please like and subscribe in order not to miss the next videos. And until then, stop guessing and start engineering. And also, while doing this, don't forget to keep on rocking.